Welcome to At Your Service, the service management podcast on the CRM Audio Network, with your hosts, Sean Tabor and Scott LaFonte.
This episode of At Your Service is sponsored by Maplytics by Analogic. Maplytics by Analogic is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geo-analytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities within Dynamics CRM to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage the right customers at the right time. Maplytics now works with Dynamics 365 version 9 and Dynamics 365 app for mobile and tablet. Analogic is a leading Microsoft Gold CRM ISV delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Maplytics by Analogic for sponsoring At Your Service.
Well, welcome to another episode of At Your Service. We have a special treat for everybody. It's just me today, Sean Tabor. Scott LaFonte is not with us. He's on assignment, I think, at a baseball field practicing with his son. But we do have two guests, colleagues from the UK. Always happy when I could talk about an international flavor to the podcast. We have with us kylohill and Chris Huntingford from the UK. Hey guys, how you guys doing?
Awesome.
Hey,
Good to be on the call.
So, the reason why I wanted you guys to come on is you just attended an event over in the UK. Was it CRM Saturday?
That's it.
Okay. And a lot of cool stuff.
CRM Saturday of old, and now 365 Saturdays, as we're trying to bring the AX or finance and operations bits in as well.
Okay, fair enough. So 365 Saturday, and they have. I've seen these events pop up before, and I've always wanted to talk about them because I can never join them. They don't come to Tampa, so it's either Atlanta, San Francisco, etc. Everywhere I'm not, basically. So seeing on Twitter that not only this was happening, but it was happening somewhere where I knew people going. And there was guests that were top notch. I mean, Microsoft had big guns out there, and that's not a dig to Ben Vollmer.
So you can make as many digs as you
well,
want.
He
likes the kind of thing.
Yes, he can. And but also James Phillips was in attendance, and that's a big deal. For those of us who follow Dynamics 365 and are in the community. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what the event is, how it's organized, and then go into some of the topics that you guys were able to witness at 365 Saturdays. Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
So,
Mr. Hill, do you want to go first?
Yes. Yeah. So, Kyle, tell me what is the event in general? 365 Saturdays.
Okay. So it's just a community organized event that's quite heavily backed by Microsoft. We actually had it in their offices in London, and as I said a little bit earlier, it's been renamed to promote the whole Dynamics 365. Proposition, the combining of the ERP and CRM elements. So the event was oversubscribed substantially. I think we had about 180 people there on the Saturday. But it just gives us an opportunity to come together and really get a couple of experts from a number of different fields, and for them to share their knowledge. So it was split over 2 days, the Friday and the Saturday, and the Friday was a very hands-on sort of hackathon and labs that the guys provided. Ben Vollmer did one with Connected Field Service, which I attended, and it was actually a run-through on all the different elements that make up that solution, putting it into practice, some architectural guidelines, quite a bit of information on what's coming down, the roadmap for that solution, and what alterations you can make to it to fit your business. So a lot of insightful and in-depth knowledge. Ben was walking the floor with us so we could ask questions. A lot of people ranging from experts in the Dynamics communities to people that had seen Dynamics for the first time. So very representative. And on the other side, Chris, I think you were doing the other Hackathon lab.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. The one thing that I really liked about that, excuse me, was the fact that it wasn't just focused on Dynamics. They brought in a load of other techs. There was Azure Machine Learning. They brought in mobile. It was really epic. And I think it gave a lot of people the opportunity to actually learn from scratch how to do that stuff. So, I mean, I had no idea how to do any of the lab type stuff with Azure Machine Learning. Got a basic understanding now, but yeah, it was really great.
So it gave folks hands-on capabilities that they might not have had otherwise, or would have had to spend a bunch of money to be able to build their own kind of kit.
Yeah, spot on, man.
Okay, outstanding.
I think the one thing was that it opened up a load of people's eyes, because I think we all kind of thought, well, you know, the stuff's out there. It's a bit like Paranormal Activity, man. You can see the door moving, you just don't know what's moving it. And it's epic because we got to see the behind the scenes type stuff, which was I absolutely enjoyed. It was great.
So having that kind of benefit, I could see how that could open your eyes to potential new possibilities when implementing Dynamics 365. But did it give you did it kind of give you like a key to the lock to where that it really unlocked something for you where you weren't familiar with it at all, or was it all surface level knowledge and then that just gave you a chance to dive a little deeper?
Both. So my thoughts were from somebody that's not a developer and that's not super technical, like I'm techie enough, but it helped me understand that there is stuff out there that'll help me do the things I need to, and it's not as complicated as I thought. So, you know, a lot of people shy away from things like Power BI and Azure Machine Learning and all that type of thing because they think that it's massively technical, and it is, but well, to a point, but you can do it. Mm-hmm. So from a functional point of view, we're all going, well, you know, like this stuff is scary, but it's not. It's actually not that difficult. So it was really good to know that I could do that myself without having to rely on 1,000 developers.
That's really awesome.
And I think the other thing, Chris, is that a lot of the solutions that were shown were highlighting the Microsoft platform. So the low-code, no-code solutions of Power Apps, of Flow, Logic Apps, Power BI, these sorts of technologies that one of the themes was about citizen developers and just enabling a lot of people to extend the solutions in a mostly supported way was really helpful, where we could enable customers and partners to say, well, if you think about things this way, it's not going to take you a massive integration project to achieve the outcome. There are better ways. And the experts in particular were quite generous with sharing experiences that they'd had and solutions that they'd come up with to problems like that. Some of the things mentioned, like the Cosmos DB. I mean, having a globally scaled database available from anywhere on the planet a couple of years ago was just unheard of. And now you can just go and use a Flow or something like that and tap into it, which is a huge benefit for very little investment from an end user point of view.
Yeah, and the one thing I do like about it is the fact that, you know, the stuff, there's so many places where you can learn about it. And I mean, obviously on the Dynamics Learning Portal, that's some of it. But I mean, people are writing about this and they're sharing the information. Like the MVPs have been so generous in sharing their knowledge about what this does and how it works with Dynamics. Like, again, it's something that we've always kind of thought, well, it's really difficult and it's really hard to get access to, but it's really not. And I reckon what we should probably do is get, you know, more blog posts and articles out there about this type of thing.
Yeah, I often find that there are a lot of opportunities to take advantage of technologies that people just don't know about, right? I mean, it's out there, and once you understand it, that it's available, it's relatively intuitive to take advantage of and implement from in a small scale for learning, for example. And I know that the Docs team, the team at docs.microsoft.com, are really working to retrofit that site to be more explanatory and more transparent on those kind of topics, not only for Dynamics 365, but for Office 365, NuGet, Xamarin, all the technologies, right? So
Yep.
That's interesting that opportunity you had at this event could open up so many possibilities and see how easy it is to do work with those technologies. And were you able to take away specific examples that you could then use going forward, or were they more intro level kind of samples?
Well, from my point of view, I think it was a bit of both. Again, Ben Vollmer explained a lot of stuff around RSO and how to not use it and how to use it. I called it a kind of anti-selling session. It was actually brilliant because he basically said, this is when you do it, and if you're doing it like this, you're an idiot type thing. And no, but it was good, man, because ultimately, a lot of us kind of in the audience were like, okay, well, now that makes sense. So there was a bit of more of a deep dive there. It wasn't just an intro. But then when I look at the stuff from, what Mohammed presented around GDPR, that was an intro, and it opened a lot of people's eyes. So there was such a big difference between all the different sessions from my point of view.
So let's talk.
And there was also
go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
There was also a strong presence from some of the ISVs. So, Dynamics doesn't do everything, and where there are shortcomings, there were a couple of ISVs on hand that were actually running, in some cases, full-day workshops on how the products work and how they can work together. The likes of the Cafe X guys were there, the Resco guys were there, some guys from Riva were there, and just having very open and frank conversations about what they do and how they can help. And that theme came across continually. Everyone was there just to help and see what the best outcome that could be achieved and how we would go and give that to customers.
Yeah, and on that note, you're absolutely right, man. I think the Cafe X guys, there's a lot of cool stuff coming with those guys. I mean, what they're doing is unbelievable. This whole customer experience thing, they just gave us a kind of toe in the ocean around, web chats and bringing up the right information about the right person at the right time. But I cannot wait until they've got the video and voice stuff. That is
and bots, Chris, bots.
Oh, dude, you love bots. You're obsessed.
The bot stuff's cool. That's a great example of, if I was at this event, that's an example of one of the things that I would want to really dig in more and understand, even if it's just at a functional level to where I could talk to it, is the bot framework, the things that the bots can do. I find that when you go into a project and some of your project folks have investigated anything about the Dynamics platform, one of the things they hear is bot, and that's like it's like a silver bullet to them. Yeah. Whereas you really need to understand how it can help in certain scenarios and situations. And there's also a multitude, I would imagine, of scenarios where a bot is not something that you would think of straight away as a potential solution, right? Because it's under the covers and it's not a chat bot popping up in a window, for example. So that's fascinating to me is that the bot framework that's available to us and what we can do with it.
Yeah, I'm going to leave Kyle Bot Hill to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those technologies that is complementary to Dynamics and can be used for so many different scenarios, but it isn't a silver bullet that's just going to solve all the problems. And what I find we often lead with when having bot discussions is that it will help automate mundane things. So there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily want to do and have to click through a 20-step process if you don't need to. And bots are really good at that. So to give an example, and the Cafe X guys give this example as well, is after you've had a call or a web chat with a customer service representative, you can actually hand it over to a bot to then run through a quick satisfaction survey. You don't actually need to tie up a physical resource going through that where, a customer just has to go and rate questions on 1 to 5. So those trivial and often mundane tasks, perfect place for a bot to take over. The other scenario around field service, interestingly enough, is helping you schedule. We've got a whole lot of resources and capabilities and such like that are available. We can then go and suggest times to a customer or potentially ask them which day they would like and see if we can match things up. Now, it's a slightly different way of looking at things, but it's one of the use cases that could work in certain scenarios, and again is fairly cost effective in terms of meeting a customer's need.
I typically envision the use of bots in situations where the client's coming in through maybe a portal or something like that, a different interface than someone in a licensed user hands-on keyboard, right? So they're coming in, they're presenting information, and decisions have to be made based on logic. But what I'm hearing is that's not exactly all cases. It's only a flavor.
Correct, and one of the interesting things where bots is going from my perception is that it's going to become more and more proactive. So status updates on a ticket that you logged could potentially be facilitated through a bot, and with the multitude of channels out there, particularly Facebook Messenger and Skype, you can then go and reach somebody and be fairly certain that you'll be able to get an action. And that kind of leads into the bigger world of brand perception and awareness. And I know, Chris, you do quite a lot of work on this and research into it, and I'm sure you can tell us how that could complement that scenario.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, man, is that it's one thing to be able to treat your customers well and give them access to your information and your services via multiple channels, but it's another thing to really do it well. Like, it's another thing to really give them that kind of unique customer experience. And one of the things we're going to be talking about at CRM UG Summit is the ability to do that using things like CafeX, where a bot would be one mechanism to allow your customer to chat to you, well, you being part of the conversation essentially. But I guess that as long as you're promoting or allowing customers to access your information in a way that they prefer or want to access it, like then you're on the road to a wonderful customer experience. And my guess is that with bots, what's going to happen is that yes, you're going to start off building a bot framework and giving your customers access to that detail, but to do it well is a very different thing.
Yeah,
I always say to people when they're like, we're going to implement web chat, I'm like, that's cool, do it, but make sure you do it properly, because if you don't, you're going to piss people off.
Exactly.
And that's the same thing with bots. If you're going to really provide your customers with a good experience, do it properly. Make sure you have the right person doing it for you. Make sure you have the right framework. If you don't, people are just going to get angry. So that's about customer experience, and that's massive.
Yeah, and I would liken that to my own personal experience with my Amazon device, right? It does a lot of cool things, but 9 times out of 10, it doesn't know what to do. And and it's so frustrating to the point where I now have a Google Home. So, that's it. That's the mind of someone coming into your business looking for customer service. If they're, to your point, if they're not finding an appropriate level of expectation and experience, they will go somewhere else, and they will not use it. So it's a great point.
Yeah, I'm terrified of it because as much as the tech is cool and as much as we all love the concept of a bot, as long as it's providing value and as long as it's done properly, and I'm worried that a customer or someone is going to implement something like this, and the person doing it isn't going to do a great job, or they don't have the right, they're not ready for it. The customer might not be ready for it. And yeah, man, it's the difference between Hotel 1 and Hotel 2, right?
Yeah.
Somebody goes into Hotel 1's website, they're interacting with the bot, it's not done properly. It's so easy to close the web browser and type in Hotel 2's URL.
Yep.
And for me, that's what I would do.
Absolutely.
So, and I've got a huge big red flag on this type of thing where I say to people, if you're going to do automation, make sure you are ready for it and you do it properly.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely the key.
Yeah.
So, at the event, we touched on Ben was there, Ben Vollmer, friend of
He's my new hero, man. I love that guy.
Friend of the podcast, Ben Vollmer. Yeah. And let's talk about his session and what he covered.
Kyle, you can take this one, dude.
Sure. So Ben actually ran 2 sessions, and the first one on the Friday was the hands-on connected field service hackathon. And what Microsoft have done is they've provided this connected field service add-on for Dynamics, and the idea being is that it opens up Dynamics to the world of IoT and the multitude of devices that are out there, including the Alexas and Google Homes of the world, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And the idea being is that you do become more connected, but in the same vein that you enable a lot of automation and personalization based off this huge amount of data that is being collected. So, I mean, if you had to imagine all the sensors that you could have in your house and they're collecting data day in and day out and feeding that back somewhere, if you give an organization access to the data, it can become hugely valuable, especially when it's aggregated up across a number of end customers. So Ben was explaining, how to set this solution up, and he actually brought with some IoT devices where we could pick up humidity and temperature, light sensitivity, and things like that. So we connected them all up, and Ben showed us how to configure the solution to achieve a couple of simple outputs. In our scenario, we were just monitoring the temperature, and Ben's favorite is to do heavy breathing on the device, and that kicks the temperature up a little bit. I don't know why he likes that or where he learned that trick, but maybe a story for the next podcast.
I think that probably happened on accident. He just breathes heavy in general. He noticed that, he said, "Oh, I can use this in a presentation." I'm sure that's
yeah. So it was really cool to actually see this in practice, and Ben did share a lot of again architectural insight as to why the solution, in Microsoft's opinion, is going to be successful. They've placed a lot of emphasis on it for 2 reasons, really. And the first one is obviously the explosion of IoT devices that are now available. And the second one is that it expands the Dynamics world into the Azure world as well. Mm-hmm. So with all the different services there, from the bot stuff to the cognitive stuff to the globally distributed databases of Cosmos DB, these are all services that never used to be available to the Dynamics world. And as Dynamics has been brought more into the mainstream, and field service has been leading that pull of Dynamics, we now see that these services are available and can be lit up, and some truly remarkable scenarios. Machine learning. Chris mentioned that, but if you think of the power of now all this data from these IoT devices and running it through machine learning and executing some action, in the scenario around field service, and making sure that the right technician at the right time is dispatched to you, and only dispatched if really necessary, that can be hugely valuable for customer and company, and transform into a new line of business.
For sure, and there's a lot of additional ways that connected field service can help customers, and we talked with Ben on, I think it was episode 8, so a couple episodes ago, and it was fascinating to understand that IoT and what it can do is not just monitoring devices necessarily anymore. It's really a way to gather data for people within using Dynamics 365, that it's a more intuitive way of collecting that data and presenting that data in a way that it's more actionable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always looked at IoT as strictly, monitoring devices, and there's an alert and something happens, but it's so much more than that, and it's cool that Dynamics is moving towards that, and now, was that connected field service, was that all day on Saturday?
So that was on
Friday?
That was
in the
Friday one,
afternoon.
Yeah. Okay.
And then on Saturday, around field service, Ben ran a session around RSO, so resource scheduling optimization, and really just laid it out as to where the product is, what it does well, where it will not work. And again, this is the sort of open and honest feedback that these community events facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
And he just lit the path for us and said, if you understand that these schedule boards are likely to change, the schedule board representing all the bits of work that your typical field service agent would need to undertake, based on people cancelling or additional high priority work orders coming in, this board becomes fairly fluid. Now, to try and manage it, Ben showed up some numbers, and one resource with 10 work orders, there's typically over 3 million different variations of how that person just could get to that work order in terms of maps and locations and driving directions. So trying to update this thing manually is never going to work. So Microsoft brought in this RSO product. The challenge being is that it's not always going to work in every single scenario. So Ben laid out where it will and where it won't. And the interesting thing out of that session is that often the savings were in the millions of dollars per year for companies, and that's been observed, from a number of different companies, and that's a huge saving on, again, a fairly mundane and trivial task.
Right.
That we typically have back office staff looking after, but they can now be complemented with technology and achieve a huge margin increase in terms of profitability.
And did he talk about leveraging Glimpse to make sure that you know where the people are and that sort of thing as an additional feed into RSO, or is he strictly talking on the knowledge of the start location, site location, that kind of thing?
Well, he kind of got thrown a little bit of a curveball where he actually was filling in for somebody else who couldn't make the session. So I don't know how much prep time he had, but Glimpse wasn't on there. It was more just about the fundamental capabilities of RSO and also of some of the new stuff that's coming in the next release planned in the April timeframe, just around how they're rejigging the algorithms and making it more accurate, and putting together some more numbers to prove where RSO does provide value. There's obviously a license cost there, and if organizations are going to spend money on these licenses, they want to understand what sort of benefit they're going to get out of it.
Right. Well, and on top of that license cost, there's an Azure cost as well.
Yep.
So
correct.
That is part and parcel of the new, what I would say, the new Dynamics 365 implementation experience, quote unquote. Everything of note is somehow tied to Azure, and that's a reality that, when talking with customers, they have to understand that an Azure subscription is not necessarily nice to have anymore. I mean, there's a lot of whether it's data export service, whether it's using RSO or using functions, Power BI, customer insights. There's so many different things now where that needs to be leveraged and taken into account. It's not as simple you just buy this license and everything, you get everything you possibly can want. And that's a difficult conversation sometimes to have with clients that don't grasp the power of the cloud, right? And
Yeah, you're dead right.
I would agree, and I would also highlight something that there were a couple of sessions at the event again that showed that when we light up Azure and we start using some of the services, there were sessions on sort of DevOps and continuous integration. And that's a great example of where we can leverage Azure and, source control of your choice. And as we start developing new functions and features and code and even customizations in CRM, we can quite easily deploy them to a number of different environments. So, if our brand perception, Chris, dipping into your world there, things are changing and we need to respond to that. Gone are the days of a six-month-long CRM project to go and respond to this. We can now go and respond, in a couple of days, couple of weeks, whatever it is, and facilitate this whole sort of DevOps pipeline through Azure and get these changes out into the world fairly rapidly. And customers can realize a huge amount of benefit, especially if, it's going to save them some money or they need to react to some certain market forces. And there were guys from institutions that had implemented this, in today's world and were giving us some numbers around, the number of man days saved and how it had helped them track down changes and if things were going wrong, where they had come from. Because the back of that, Azure also supports a lot of testing frameworks. And, the sort of smoke tests and integration tests and all these, very intensive tasks that used to take a huge amount of time. I know, Chris, you and I have both been in these scenarios testing for days on end. Azure helps to automate a huge amount of that. And I, for one, am quite thankful for that.
Yeah, the one thing that we need to somehow get out there is that, again, man, it's this air of complexity that people are like, oh, it's so difficult. Oh, like, how do I get an Azure environment going? How do I, the thing is, it's actually so easy. And that's the thing that we need to communicate to people is that it's not, it used to be this really complicated thing.
Right.
That kind of people tagged it as, and it's really not. It's actually, Kyle, okay, so as an example, connected field service, man. So provisioning one of those environments, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen in Azure. You've got there's logic apps, there's a whole set of databases that get plonked in there. How many buttons did I click to do that? I reckon I clicked 3.
Yeah, and this is something that Ben ran us through on the Friday as well. As part of the hackathon, we deployed a brand new Dynamics 365 customer engagement instance and a brand new Azure tenant and deployed all of the resources, like Chris mentioned, from the databases to the stream analytics jobs to the logic apps. And that whole process, I think it's a little bit more than 3, Chris, maybe 3.5. But it really, Sean, it's that simple. And the community are starting to understand this and starting to see how they can stretch the bounds of all these new functions that they have available to us. Chris and I fondly refer to it as the Azure periodic table of capabilities. And you really can just start picking the right ones. And gone are the days of those long investigation periods and research periods of how things could be. Number one, because the functions are available. Number two, because the community is growing and sharing their expertise, whether it's in person in events, blogs, podcasts like this, videos, pick your poison type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's hugely important to get this stuff out there. And what the other thing that I found is, so when we go chat to customers, so when we sit down and we say, hey man, you can get field service, you can get connected field service up and running, you can have the IoT devices set up, and it actually doesn't take that long. They're kind of like, well, that's not true. And you're like, well, it is, because we're doing it right now. Kyle, you've got that, you guys set up Chateau Steve with all the little devices and everything connected up to it. And it's a real life thing. And you can actually watch, when the heat sensor goes up or when the carbon monoxide sensor gets set off, that triggers cases inside Dynamics. And what is the deployment time on that, man, without device setup, the actual deployment time for connected field service?
So yeah, Sean, just for
hours.
your benefit and anyone else listening, and we've taken the connected field service element and enhanced it significantly. And one of the elements around that is actually building a physical demonstration unit,
Right.
And not with Raspberry Pis and that sort of thing, but with actual commercially available devices. And to deploy all the infrastructure, as you like, the data, the CRM solutions, all of that, we're in the region of between 2 and 3 hours, depending on what Azure regions we need and GDPR considerations and whether it's version 8.2 or 9 of Dynamics that we're going to. So, to get these solutions up and running is fairly trivial. Where we find we having to add a lot more value is around architecting these solutions correctly, extending them correctly, and more importantly, keeping an eye on the roadmap. So we mentioned that we had James Phillips available, and he actually shared a couple of nuggets. And Chris, maybe you want to go through your favorite nugget that was brought up.
That's a great segue. Let's go ahead and talk about James Phillips and what he had to say.
We had a
feeling it was a little bit revealing.
Only a bit. So, yeah. None of the MVPs, well, I'm not an MVP, but none of the MVPs in the room were aware of this. But apparently, the com add-in for Outlook is no longer deprecated. So they deprecated the deprecation message, which
fantastic
scares. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, man, what a what a way to reveal
so, Chris,
it.
the com add-in being the thick client for Outlook.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I guess a load of the partners have been going to a lot of their customers and saying, well, look, that's going, and you need to start prepping yourself to use the app, so the actual Outlook app, which is more the just like an add-in for Outlook.
Right.
And man, it's a bit of a scary one, because now we've got to go back to them and say, well, look, guys, it's no longer deprecated. What they're going to do with it, I don't know. One thing I will say, though, is that I think that tools like Riva are not going to go away. I think they are absolutely necessary. And I can tell you loads of use cases where they will work brilliantly. But again, I don't know what they're going to do with the com add-in. They will have to improve it, though, and they will have to do a lot of work at improving it.
Well,
so that's my
but
thing.
I mean, that's a possible stance, or could it be that they're just not deprecating it, but it is what it is. This is what you're getting. If you want the Outlook add-in, the com add-in, this is what it is, and we're not changing it, and it's not going away, but this is all you're getting.
Well, James Phillips said on stage, man, that they're putting significant, quote-unquote, significant investment into it.
Oh,
which
okay.
means that,
Well, all right then.
they're going to do some stuff. So
Well-
what the play is there, I don't know, but what I do know is that it was a bit of a bomb drop yesterday. And it's good. Look, it's fine. But we just need to now relay that to the right people.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a negative,
No,
right?
it's not. No.
But it's just a different reality, because for the past 6 months we've been working off the concept that version 10 Outlook's going away. Don't deploy it. Whereas now it's something that we have to take into account, and I think it's important to understand its limitations. So, for example, in a financial services implementation is where I find this most common. Delegate tracking.
Yeah.
That is a pain point, and it's not. Hopefully they can fix that with the com add-in, but it's not the best right now. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through and tweaks to make it even kind of work. But if that's going to be there, then that's fine. But I still hope that they work on the app, because I really personally love the app. It needs work as well, but no solution is perfect. I think that's where we're at right now.
You're right.
In terms of Outlook integration, whereas 5-6 years ago, the Outlook app, or not the Outlook app, the Outlook add-in was Dynamics to most people, right? It was the selling point to get them to purchase licenses. You could do everything from Outlook, and that's great, but not everybody does everything in Outlook from Outlook anymore. So I think that as long as they keep their eye on the prize and are making those strategic investments to make the comm add-in better, as well as investing in the app to make it better, I think it'll work out.
I tend to agree with you. I think, look, it's a fantastic selling point, but yeah, it does need some work. We've got a current customer at the moment that they're B2C. They're dealing with customers direct, and loads of them, and it's more around the travel industry, and they're having issues with email tracking, but massive ones. And it's one of the points where I think they somehow need to, I don't know, they've got to figure something out. But, you know, in that scenario, something like Reaver would be a really, really, really good solution. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it will have its place, but I do think that, you know, let's put it this way, supplemented by something like Reaver, yeah, we're in a good place.
Excellent. What
so
other...
the other nugget, and it may be applicable here, that and James spoke about it, was the new version of CDS, so the Common Data Service, which is also planned for sort of April 1 release. So James was quite optimistic that, you know, the release dates, you know, the twice yearly release dates for Dynamics are going to be, you know, firm and strong and never be missed. So judging on the last release, I'm taking that with a pinch of salt, but apparently there's quite a lot of emphasis on making sure that those dates aren't missed anymore. And with the next one is going to be CDS 2. And one of the things he discussed there is that CDS 2 is actually going to have 2 branches to it. And at the moment they code named them. You know, Microsoft loves a good acronym and a code name, and they've split it into 2 branches. And the first one is CDS -T, and that's very transactional based. And the other one is CDSA, and that's more analytics based. And the distinction that was made is that CDS-T is going to be very focused on transactional interactions between systems like the old CRM and AX worlds. Mm-hmm. So making sure that accounts replicate across and are uniform across the systems, products and price lists, on the field service side, you know, work orders, rates, rate cards, service charges, those sorts of things. And then on the analytics side is trying to bring the rest of the world into the Microsoft world, the likes of Adobe's and such like SAP, funnily enough, Oracle's, all building something in an analytics model that we can then pull elements as necessary into our flows. And I think it's a good announcement. I think it's a bit optimistic. Having looked at the current sort of CDS V1 with prospect to cash, while it does work in a limited fashion, I don't place much stock in it. V2, I'm a little bit more hopeful, and maybe that's the way that they can start looking at revising, you know, email tracking and the email element, you know, and maybe expand it with Office 365 in the picture.
Well, and how does that analytic versus transactional play into what we've always been hearing about customer insights and relationship analytics and that full bore kind of analytic engine for Dynamics? Is it refitting? Is it the same thing? Did they mention anything about that?
They didn't. If I had to guess, I would think that it's sort of a logical extension of something like customer insights. Microsoft aren't naive to think that the world, you know, revolves around them as much as some of their salespeople will tell you. Yeah. There are a huge amount of solutions out there in the ecosystem that generate a huge amount of important information. You know, and you think of the overused term of Customer 360. The CDSA, the analytics part of that, is a great place to land data from Office 365, from Adobe, from whatever, you know, SAP if we're choosing to use that, whatever other solutions we've got out there, we can now run analytics over that. And analytics is a broad term that could include, you know, some of the cognitive functions, some of the machine learning models, you know, those sorts of scenarios. And then selectively choose what sort of data to input into the Dynamics world specifically, and then action that as an after.
Okay. Interesting. there's God, there's so much content at this event that we could talk about. But there is one other. I don't know if you guys were in attendance, but I did notice on the agenda for Saturday that they did have a session about PSA. And I am curious to hear what happened if you were there.
No, I didn't go to that one.
It's because I mean, to me, PSA has so much opportunity. I'm still hesitant on what it can completely do, right?
I'm going to get into trouble if I say too much.
Without modifying the crap out of it.
Yeah, man. The sales piece is, if anything, not great. The actual project management side is all right, but man, it's getting it into that project, which just is a night. Sorry, I don't want to be negative, but yeah, I'm struggling with PSA, and that's just my own personal thing.
So I think, from my point of view, PSA is a great idea, and Microsoft often sees these things and doesn't always get them right. So you can think of the likes of MDM, Dynamics Marketing,
right.
A little while back, and
Great
they went down
idea,
this path
badly executed.
Yeah, well, it wasn't badly executed. They just didn't get it right. And
Right.
I think PSA, the logical place for a lot of those functions to sit is in the sort of CRM world, the customer engagement world, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a just as important part that sits in the transactional, the finance and operations world, where you're doing the historic project accounting elements. Now, you're only really going to see benefit of that when the two solutions are glued together.
Totally
And
agreed.
currently there's a huge hole there that the CDS is meant to be filling. And in practice, we haven't seen this hole, getting smaller. I imagine when, Chris, you can go from a sales execution, a typical Salesforce automation tool in the customer engagement environment, right the way through to a billed and paid invoice that's backing onto stock management and present that to a customer, they're going to fall out of their chair because a lot of systems out there really battle to do that, and it will be very costly to implement it. So I'm a little bit more optimistic on that, and let's just hope it doesn't go the way of MDM.
Right.
Yeah, the thing that worries me about PSA, okay, and there's a couple of things. First thing, the way that it's built inside Dynamics, I personally think fundamentally it's not built the right way. I mean, in my opinion, and again, I'm caveating this with it's all my opinion. This is not anyone else's perception. Just making sure everyone understands that you can't use the order entity as a contract. Like it's not the right place to do it. And
Right.
The way that you're generating these plans, right? That little scratch box where you have to open up the actual product and add in all the tasks. It's not the right way to do it. Like, I think the actual ability to manage the project, so where you have the actual project set up, you have all the tasks, you can assign the resources based on skills, that is fantastic. That is brilliant. It's that I don't think is the right. I think that they need to do a lot of work on that, and I think that if they refine the process and quote unquote things will be happening in the next 6 months
Right.
to make it a lot better.
Right.
But as a fundamental example, you cannot use a dialogue to bring in the project, to associate it to a project, because that's deprecated.
Right.
So there's stuff there that will improve, and I know it will improve. But right now, I think that sales piece needs a lot of work, and I think once they get that right, we're in a wonderful place to get PSA off the ground.
Sure.
But right now, it needs work.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what niche it fills in the short term, because I mean I could see some solutions potentially for PSA in, let's say, financial services. If you're thinking of a long-term strategy plan with your client, being able to create a project plan and with tasks and have them routed to your support staff, and have the quarterly meetings scheduled. I mean, there's some benefit there, and you could see, especially if you're a fee-based advisor, use that to understand ROI as well. I could see that, but it's just not as clean in every scenario, you know.
Yeah, it's
that
not.
It's the nuances where it kind of trips up. So it'll be interesting.
One of the scenarios that I wouldn't be surprised to see be one of the first ones that's targeted by Microsoft is in the field service world. Think of something like a product recall. Now, with the sort of unified scheduling that's going on, that's a great place where you can essentially run a project and say, we've got a part, let's think of the motor vehicle industry. We've shipped out 20,000 motor vehicles and they've all got this part that needs to be replaced. We actually have to run a project that's going to execute a number of field service type of tasks to go and replace all of these parts. And you might say to me, why do you want to do that? Well, ultimately, that product recall is going to have a cost. And there's a number of ways that you can account for that cost, but ultimately you need to know what it is. You need to run it for an extended period of time, resources in and up, multi-geos, all these sorts of things. So the platform is starting to support that. While PSA might not be where we want it to be, that's quite an appealing scenario that if you go to a field service organization and say, well, look, we could light that up for you as well fairly simply, I think there would be huge appetite for that.
Right. Yeah, and I have, a project in flight that we're trying to do something very similar to that, so I'll keep you posted on how that goes.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
It is exciting,
It
and
is.
I would love to see something like that go live. But again, my skepticism is how.
Yeah.
That's the piece that,
Yeah.
and it's purely because I've gotten my hands dirty, and I've seen the end results, and I want to know what's going to be done to make it better, essentially.
Sure.
Yeah, but it is a cool tool, and we are looking to implement elements of it at some of our customers. But yeah, Kyle is absolutely correct in saying that the full integration direct to AX or FinOps or whatever you want to call it,
Right.
it's massively part of this. It's kind of pointless without it, essentially.
Agreed. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit of stuff here, folks. This was great. This has been...
Sean, I'll got one more for you, which might be of interest.
Sure.
And this was from the Resco guys, actually.
Oh, cool.
And so at the moment, what's happening is that, the field service element relies quite heavily on Resco and the Resco technologies. And there's a bit of a disconnect between the versions of Resco and the Resco projects that are supported and what the latest version that is available. Now, the indication is that by early March, those versions are actually, there's going to be parity between the latest version and what field service supports. And this is due mainly to the Resco team actually being far more involved and even to the point where I think they may be responsible for maintaining the Resco, sort of the out-of-the-box Resco project that ships with field service.
Okay.
And one of the nice things there is that you gain a huge amount of capability from the Resco product, including some of their site survey functionality, the chat functionality, push notifications. There's a whole long laundry list, and I'm sure we can include a link in the podcast. But
Absolutely.
Don't be surprised to see a lot more field service capability being surfaced through mobile devices that we didn't have previously.
Yeah, I'm keen to see that. That will be good. That sounds very exciting. Especially that the chat capability. If that surfaced, that I think that by itself for me is a big win. That's huge.
Yeah, and that's chat. That's not sort of Skype or any of those chat. That's an inbuilt sort of Resco chat. So there's no additional licenses as far as we can tell on that.
So I wonder if I wonder if you could use it to wake a field service engineer up.
No, they never sleep, do they?
It's like you, Kyle.
Well, guys, this has been fantastic, and I anytime you guys go to one of these events, I'd love to have you on to hear about it. And as always, you guys are always welcome on the podcast.
Thank you, Sean.
Anytime you want to talk about something or have something top of mind, please feel free to reach out and I'll get you on. And in the interim, if someone wants to connect with you guys on social media, how do they go about doing that?
Oh man, I love the social. So on Twitter, I'm the tattooed CRM guy, and all my links are there, so you can catch up with me direct. And then Kyle and I run a sort of community site called Those Dynamics Guys, kind of rebranded to the Dynamics Society, where we just talk about dynamics, interact with some of the community and put some blog posts up there. So you can catch us on The Dynamics Guys at Twitter, or Those Dynamics Guys as the website URL.
thosedynamicsguys.co.uk, Chris.
That's it, yeah, sorry, mate.
So we are two South Africans based out of London, as it goes.
And a really, 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 really naughty Englishman called Will Dorrington.
Yep.
So
Well,
so I mean, it's a great way to reach out to us. And Chris said he's quite active. Linked. We're both on LinkedIn. My Twitter, kylohill. It's with an O. Just reach out. We often tweet what we're thinking. Chris is often
without filters.
Without filters, correct. He gets wildly excited about emoticons, so tweet emoticons at him.
So now that you mention that, I'm completely trying to figure out a way to get that into an implementation.
I'm really on it.
Oh my God!
And I've got to say, Megan Walker, you are a legend.
She is.
She is such a rock star.
That is outstanding. Well, we'll add links to your social media accounts to the blog as well as to the episode page, and you'll be one of the favorite sites we visit when you go into the At Your Service Pod site as well. But thanks again, guys. This has been this has been fantastic. I've had a great time, and we've learned a lot, I think. So, again, anytime you want to come on, just let me know.
Oh, thank you, Sean. It's always a pleasure to be on this. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks. On behalf of myself, Sean Tabor, my co-host, Scott LaFonte, and the Dynamics 365 diva, Sarah Jelinek, we thank you for listening and subscribing to the podcast. You can reach us at voice@crm.audio. On Twitter, you can follow us, CRM Hobbit for me, for Scott, at FLD Service _Guru, and of course at Dyne365 Diva for Sarah. For more information and content about what we spoke about on this episode and others, visit our blog at atyourservicepod.com. This has been At Your Service on the CRM Audio Network, a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.